Baseball now. Spring training has begun, and this is the first trial run of an automatic balls and strikes system. It is a challenge system for at least this portion of the test. Teams get two challenges, and only the pitcher, catcher, and batter are allowed to challenge a pitch immediately after the call. And then they go to the ABS system. And if the call is overturned, if the challenge is supported, then they keep that. If their challenge is unsuccessful, they lose one of their challenges. Um, we've seen it used, a fair amount of time so far. Occasionally to kind of amusing degree. Everyone saw the video of from the Rays game that was shared around social media where they challenged a pitch that missed by about 8 inches high. Um, I guess I'll ask what was kind of your expectation when you heard that this was going to be tested, and what do you think now that you've seen it in action for a few days?
Well, I've also seen it in action in the minors. And I love it personally. Um, I wouldn't be opposed at all as long as they're comfortable with it. Uh, by rolling with it this season, I think it is one of those rules where if they wanted to, they could just flip the switch and have it ready to go for the regular season. I would want the ballparks to do a good job of explaining what it is for the fans, right? Like, is there a counter up on the scoreboard that has two challenge lights, right? Or make sure that it's everyone understands what's going on, because I think one of the biggest issues in recent years has been like the umpires going through all this deliberation and the fans having no idea what's going on. So I think they have to have all those ducks in a row, but I love it. I think it's the perfect sort of middle ground for this whole thing. I think many people don't just want fully robotic umpires. I think it's easy to focus on eliminating the really bad calls and key scenarios that change a game, and those absolutely have to be fixed. But you know, there's the human umpires have a role beyond just calling the balls and strikes. Like in those moments, like they have to, they massage the strike zone. They expand it when necessary. Like as an extreme example, you know, blowout game, 13-2, position players in the game in the seventh inning. Do we really need the robot squeezing, you know, Justinson Garcia throwing, trying to throw the ball over the plate in the seventh inning? Like, I just don't, So there are a lot of, and that's an extreme case, but there are other ones throughout the game where, I just think you need the human presence to massage the strike zone. I also personally, I think, you know, there are other human elements where a pitcher recognizes that an umpire has a certain strike zone and he pitches to it. If every pitcher is just sort of you know pitching to exactly what the robot strike zone is, then the pitchers themselves kind of become robots, and you've removed all kinds of other human elements from the game that I think are interesting. You know, I think having a challenge system is the perfect spot for this. It'll add strategy. Do you burn one early in the game, or do you hold it off to the end? But I will say the one thing I worry about is the slippery slope, where if a team burns their challenges earlier in the game and then we get to the ninth and there's a bad call, and it's like, okay, well, clearly we need to expand this, and then maybe that's a booth review, and then it becomes, well, how often do you do the booth review, and before you know it, you truly are just you know using robots to determine every single ball and strike. So it is in all the other sports we've seen. Once you introduce and expand instant replay, it's kind of like a Pandora's box, and so I fear the same thing happening in baseball. But if it can somehow just stay to this system, I think it's the perfect way to do it.
I'd love to see the douchey catcher who it's an 18-5 game, and he challenges on the David Hamilton ephus pitch.
Yeah.
Um I have a lot of opinions on this. I think, by and large, I don't like replay. But I realize I'm in a minority of maybe only a handful of people.
I'm
Most
with you on
people,
that.
what's that?
I know I'm with you on that. I'm not a replay person
Yeah, I
either.
mean, yeah, most people say, well, the most important thing is to get the call right. I've for most of my early life, whether the call was right or not, it was, you had to roll with it one way or the other. Um, that's what, those of us who have not played professionally, that's what we always had to do. If the call is bad, you roll with it and you move on. But I realize, especially when it comes to professional sports, when there's millions on the line, you can't really do that. I do worry a little bit about it becoming too much like the NBA or the NFL, where, when I watch an NFL game now and there's a touchdown, I don't go, yeah, touchdown. I look and I'm like, okay, is there a challenge flag? No, let's watch the replay. Okay, let's bring in Mike Pereira. He thinks it's good. Are we going to go to a challenge because it's the fourth quarter? No. All right, let's get, and then okay, now we're going to commercial, and now I can be like, okay, cool, that thing counted. The NBA is even worse. Like the NBA, there's a play, and then sometimes, like, if they don't do the real time challenge, they come back like 5 minutes later, and they're like, oh, actually, that 3-pointer was a 2-pointer, so this score is different. Or they go, oh, we'll go to the replay, see if there was a phantom foul, and for me, it's just like totally sucked the excitement out of those moments. And so I that's the thing that sinks, is there will be that moment in a big league game where it'll be a clutch moment, 3-2 pitch, guy dots the outside corner, strike three, you're like, yeah, and then they're like, oh no, we're going up top, and they're like, okay, well, now I need to wait for 2 minutes to find out whether my excitement was warranted.
Yeah, and then you have, like, in freaking Celtics games where you have Scal saying green light special going into the break, and then the Red Sox, it'll be Monaco or Will Miller-Brooks going red light special going going into the commercial break. So yeah, I'm with you, and I'm of the belief that, like, I know people love complaining about refs and love, leaning into conspiracies and gambling and some of that stuff. I think there are real concerns, but I think by and large, officiating in all four leagues is better than it's ever been. It's just our replays and our TVs and our, all this stuff is so much better than it's ever been, that you see everything. And so I just, I don't think the officiating is that bad, but it's just, I think we're at a point of no return. Like, I don't think the toothpaste can go back in. Like, I'm like you, I remember growing up and you just kind of brushed it off when there was a bad call, whether you were playing or watching. I don't think society is ever going to get back to that mindset of just letting it go. I think we're too far gone as a species that I just don't see it happening. But I think I just worry that it's easy to focus on, put all the emphasis on thinking about, fixing the bad calls in the big spots. But, like, there's so much other human stuff attached to balls and strikes that make baseball an interesting sport. The pitcher getting mad at the ump, the manager yelling at the ump, the hitter getting upset, or, like I said earlier, the pitcher sort of like reacting to the expanding or shrinking zone and adjusting their game, which is all part of being a good pitcher. Like, there's all these sort of branch off human elements that all get removed if you just automate all balls and strikes. And maybe we can have a conversation whether it's ultimately a good thing because you fix the calls, but it's just eventually you're left with something little more than a simulation, which isn't fun.
I've got two little kind of wiggles with it. So the first one is very small. I would prefer if even pitchers didn't have the ability to challenge, because no offense to pitchers, but they're pitchers. They're babies about a lot of stuff, and their grasp of the strike zone, you can just tell by watching games, a lot of times is not very good. In fact, sometimes it can be pretty bad. So maybe if you are a pitcher and you want to have like a signal with your catcher, that you can be like, hey, I want to challenge that, and then your catcher has to be the one who ultimately requests it, because a lot of time the catcher will be like, no, man, like, you might have thought, but come on, dude, no. So that's kind of like a little niggle I have with it. Big picture, this is a change to the rules of what a strike and a ball is, and I think that a lot of people are not grasping that. So 1 second, because I was just trying to look up the exact wording of the MLB strike zone. I looked it up last night. My iPad's not cooperating at the moment. But basically, the MLB strike zone And the way it's worded similarly across every level, Little League, Babe Ruth, everything, is if the ball crosses, if the ball gets, somewhere between the midpoint of the chest and the knees and crosses any part of the plate, which means that the strike zone is 3-dimensional. It's not a flat plane. So we see the box on TV and we think of it as just, well, it crosses the plate within this box. It's a, what's that called? Trapezoidal shape, because the plate is like that little house shape, upside down house shape. And I think that gets lost a lot because, the measurement. So apparently the pitch tracks that you see on TV is taken from the front of the plate, but the ABS system is calibrated to somewhere in the middle of the plate. So, it might seem like a little thing, but that's a fairly sizable amount. And so if you're like a sinker ball pitcher, let's say, you can have a ball that comes in and nicks the bottom of the strike zone, but then drops below where the ABS plane says a strike is. On the flip side, like, I know we all laughed at that high changeup that was high, but from watching it, I can't say necessarily that maybe that changeup did come in and it was high at the ABS, but maybe it dropped down to where, if we were talking about a truly 3-dimensional plate, it could have nicked the plate. And, with the human umpires, maybe they're, not maybe, but like they're definitely not making all those calculations in their brain. But this does change the rules of a strike zone. It does change it for at least 2 pitches per game, from being a 3-dimensional strike zone to determining what a ball and strike is, to being a 2-dimensional plane determining what a ball and strike is. And I think that does matter.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But and on top of that, I think the TV strike zone is not nearly as accurate as people think it is.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think everyone sort of lives and dies by it, and then you have those calls where, there's the little bit of space between the ball and the line, and everyone gets upset about it. But like, if the thing is even a little bit inaccurate, all of a sudden the ball actually nicks the edge, and in those situations we're all like, yep, you got it. And so it's like, I think people live and die by that thing on the TV screen too much. But yeah, I didn't know that about the actual wording of a rule of balls and strikes. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. And I guess, to the point, yeah, you start like over defining and drawing too many lines on these things. And where does it stop? I don't, like I said earlier, I fear the slippery slope of, like, over defining and over outlining all these different parts of the game instead of just like letting the humans decide it. But I don't know.
I'll be curious to find out, like, specifically which players truly have the best grasp of the strike zone, because I know, like, catchers are used to framing. They have a general idea of what the strike zone is, and the way that they frame usually doesn't change too much from batter to batter. So now that it's a computerized system that's changing from batter to batter, whereas you once framed that thing at a certain height above the ground, and assumed, hey, this is a strike. It's like, well, it might have been a strike on the last guy who's 5'6", but it's not necessarily a strike now on the guy who's 6'2". So that might be good or bad for, like, Aaron Judge, because now he'll have a true strike zone. But we'll find out who actually gets what the real strike zone is, or what they pictured what the strike zone was in their minds.
Well, that'll be interesting too for catchers, because framing is one of these sort of advanced analytics that's really taken off in the past decade or so, and is like a real big measurement for how teams assess catchers. And I mean, if I remember it right, I think that was one of Christian Vasquez's weak points, was he was not considered a very good framer. I mean, he had a good arm, but a lot of people said he's not a great defensive catcher because he's bad at framing. Whereas, well, now does that matter? If there's no frame, if the framing doesn't matter, maybe Christian Vasquez still is your franchise catcher. I don't know.
Have we just made Martin Maldonado obsolete?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, he doesn't have a job.
Yeah, because he ain't in there to hit 160 anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So Speaking of catchers, I don't know if you saw Kyle Teal hit a bomb off of rookie Sasaki yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I am most interested to see who is the first and best person that figures out a way to take advantage of this. Like who will be, whether maybe like who will be the pitcher who figures out the ABS equivalent of the tush push, where like it's like they figure out like a way to exploit something that's like not illegal yet, but like I think it will be interesting to see which team or which pitcher figures that out first.
It's going to be like when you're growing up and you put the chair behind the plate for wiffle ball.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew anybody that was good enough to do the curveball that wrapped around your back and still nick the corner of the chair. Who's going to be the one to figure that out?
Yeah, right. Or even like who's the one that figures out, if you wear you wear a certain like chain or something, it screws with the laser. I don't know.
Someone's going to figure out how to cheat it. You're right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
put a jamming device in your back pocket, and it's so. Anyway, Robo umps, the wave of the future.